If I hand her over right now, I keep the promise I made. If I hold her 1 second longer, I don't know if I'll ever be able to let go. Efua woosily thought it with the baby's first cry, still hanging in the air of the delivery room. Her arms already half raised before she'd decided anything at all. Efua, the doctor's voice was gentle, careful, the voice of someone who had clearly been briefed on exactly how complicated this delivery was before it even began. Do you want to hold her first, or should we bring her straight to Mr. Young? Efua looked at the small, furious, red-faced girl being wrapped in a hospital blanket 6 feet away, and for one long, unbearable moment, she genuinely didn't know the answer. Stay with me. This isn't the story you think it is yet. 11 months earlier, the arrangement had been simple, at least on paper. Efua Woosuli, Ghanaian Korean, 34, a nursing assistant supplementing an unreliable income with what the clinic's coordinator had called one of the most straightforward compensated surrogacy arrangements we've facilitated. A healthy gestational carrier for young Tae-young and Min Soo-ah, a wealthy Korean couple unable to carry a pregnancy themselves due to a congenital heart condition that made it medically dangerous for Soo-ah to do so. We're not asking you to be anything but the person carrying her safely, Soo-ah had said, in their first meeting, her hands folded neatly in her lap, a directness in her that Efua hadn't expected from someone so wealthy. I know how this usually goes in the stories people tell. Surrogate falls in love with the family, gets attached, everyone ends up in court. I don't want that. I want a clear arrangement and a healthy baby, and I want you to feel like a professional doing skilled work, not a stranger loaning us her body. That's exactly what I want too, Efua said, meaning it entirely at the time. She had not expected to like Soo-ah as much as she came to, over the following months. She had not expected Soo-ah to show up unannounced at her apartment with soup during a difficult first trimester, or to text her at midnight asking, half joking and half desperate, whether it was normal to already love someone you'd never met. You're allowed to love her, Efua told her, one afternoon in Soo-ah's kitchen, both of them elbow-deep in a batch of jollof rice Efua was teaching her to make badly. She's yours. I'm just the room she's staying in for a while. You say that, Soo-ah said, like it isn't the most generous thing anyone's ever done for me. A surrogate who wasn't supposed to get attached. A client who wasn't supposed to become a friend. If you think you know how these arrangements usually go wrong, you're about to find out this one goes wrong in a way nobody wrote a contract for. Young Tae-young, Efua learned slowly, was harder to read than his wife. A controlled, precise man who ran his family's investment firm with the same guarded efficiency he seemed to apply to every relationship in his life, including, it seemed, his marriage. He wasn't always like this, Soo-ah told her during her 6th month, sitting in the nursery they'd already half-finished decorating. Before my diagnosis, he used to actually finish sentences with emotion in them. Now he manages me like I'm a risk on a balance sheet, checks in, confirms, never asks how I actually feel because I think he's terrified of the answer. Have you told him that? I've tried. He hears it as criticism instead of what it actually is. Soo-ah rested a hand on her own chest, an unconscious gesture Efua had started to notice more often as the months passed. I think he's already grieving me a little, even though I'm still right here. It's easier for him to start letting go early than to be surprised by it later. Efua didn't understand, not fully, what that meant until the 7th month, when Soo-ah was hospitalized overnight after a cardiac episode the doctors described carefully as a warning, not yet a crisis. A warning. Everyone in this story is about to learn exactly how much that word can be lying to you. The full crisis came 3 weeks later, at 34 weeks pregnant, not during the pregnancy itself, but in the ordinary quiet of a Tuesday evening. Soo-ah's heart simply stopping, while she sat reading in the same nursery she and Efua had painted together, her husband finding her too late for anything to be done. Efua was 7 months pregnant with someone else's daughter when she attended Soo-ah's funeral, standing at the back specifically so no one would have to explain to unfamiliar relatives who the visibly pregnant stranger was. Young Tae-young found her there anyway. She talked about you more than she talked about the pregnancy itself, toward the end, he said, his voice carefully flat in the specific way of someone holding himself together through sheer discipline. I didn't understand why until I read what she'd written. Written. A letter for after. He didn't elaborate further, and Efua didn't ask, though the weight of what she already suspected it might contain settled into her chest like something physical. A letter written by a dying woman to a stranger carrying her daughter. If you think you already know what's in it, you don't. Not the actual words. Keep watching. Soo-ah's letter arrived by courier 2 days after the funeral, and Efua read it alone in her apartment, sitting on her kitchen floor exactly the way she had every hard conversation of her adult life. Efua, if you're reading this, then I ran out of time faster than either of us expected, and I need to ask you for one more thing that has nothing to do with the contract we signed. Tae-young doesn't know how to grieve out loud. He's going to disappear into work, into control, into managing our daughter the way he manages everything he's afraid of losing. I need you to not let that happen to her. Not because you owe me anything. You've already given us everything the contract asked for and more, but because I've watched you these 8 months, and you are exactly the kind of steady, honest presence he's going to need and be too proud to ask for. I'm not asking you to replace me. I'm asking you to stay long enough that she grows up knowing what it looks like when someone shows up for you without being asked twice. Stay for her. And if you can manage it, be patient with him. He's better than the version of himself grief is about to turn him into for a while. Thank you for the 9 months you never had to give us. Soo-ah. Efua sat with the letter for a long time before she folded it and understood, with a clarity that frightened her, that she had just been asked to keep a promise no legal document could ever enforce. A dying woman's final request, a grieving husband who doesn't yet know it exists, and a surrogate who's about to discover the law has no idea what to do with any of this. Stay with me. The legal fight hasn't even started yet. The baby, a girl they named Hana, was born 6 weeks later, 3 weeks premature, in the delivery room where the story had opened. The exact moment Efua stood frozen between handing her over and holding on. She chose, in the end, to hold her for exactly 90 seconds, before placing her gently into Tae-young's waiting arms herself. A decision that felt, in the moment, like the entire shape of what was still ahead of her. The legal complications surfaced within a week. The surrogacy contract, drafted with both intended parents as named legal guardians, had never accounted for one of them dying before the birth, leaving Tae-young's sole parental claim in a gray zone the family's attorney described, with visible discomfort, as more contested than any of us would like. You could challenge this, the attorney, a sharp older woman named Attorney Han, told Efua directly, in a private meeting Tae-young didn't know had happened. As the gestational carrier, with the second intended parent deceased before finalization, you have a stronger legal position than you might realize. Some courts would lean toward you. I don't want to challenge it, Efua said. I want to talk to him directly, not through lawyers. She had the legal leverage to take the child and walk away with almost no resistance. If you think this story is building toward a custody battle, you've been watching the wrong genre. This one turns somewhere else entirely. She found Tae-young at his office 2 days later than she meant to. Both of them exhausted in the specific way that new grief and new fatherhood compound into something almost indistinguishable. Your attorney told me what I could do, Efua said, sitting across from him without being invited to. I want you to hear directly from me instead of guessing what I'm planning. I'm not taking her from you. I never intended to. Something in his shoulders dropped, visibly, for the first time since she'd known him. I've been waiting for you to say the opposite since the funeral. I know. I think you've been waiting for everyone to disappear or take something from you since the funeral, which is exactly the thing Soo-ah asked me not to let happen. Efua hesitated, then decided the letter deserved honesty over strategy. She wrote to me, before she died, asked me to stay not for the baby's sake alone, but because she was worried about what grief was going to turn you into if no one stayed close enough to notice. Tae-young was quiet long enough that Efua thought she'd overstepped entirely. She always did that, he said finally, voice rough. Managed my grief in advance the way she managed everything else. Even her dying, she was still trying to take care of me. She asked me to be patient with you. I told her silently that I would try. Efua stood, gathering her coat. I'm not here to replace her, and I'm not here because a contract obligates me to be. I'm here because I made a promise to someone I respected, and I intend to keep it, on whatever terms actually work for Hana. And for you, if you're willing to let that happen honestly instead of just managing it. A promise instead of a lawsuit. A grieving husband who has no idea yet how much that choice is about to change the next year of his life. If you think you know where this ends, you're about to be wrong in the best possible way. The first months of shared custody were, by any honest account, clumsy. Efua came twice a week initially, then 3 times, ostensibly for Hana, though the visits stretched longer each time. Tae-young learning slowly how to hold his daughter without the careful, managed distance he applied to everything else. Efua learning how to be present in a house that still held Soo-ah in every corner without either of them pretending otherwise. You don't have to keep tiptoeing around saying her name, Efua told him one evening, watching him hesitate mid-sentence for the 3rd time. Hana should grow up hearing her mother's name spoken like she mattered, not skipped over like a wound. I'm not good at this, Tae-young admitted, talking about her without it undoing me completely. Then let it undo you a little when it needs to. I'll still be here after. Efua settled Hana against her shoulder, the baby already drifting toward sleep. Soo-ah didn't ask me to fix your grief. She asked me to not let you disappear into avoiding it. Those are different jobs, and I only signed up for the second one. A father learning to grieve out loud for the first time. A woman keeping a promise that was never actually about her. Watch closely. This is the part where something starts changing that neither of them planned for. It was, predictably and entirely without either of their intentions. Somewhere around the 5th month that Efua realized she was staying for reasons that had stopped being solely about the promise. She noticed it first in small, unremarkable details. The specific, focused way Tae-young listened when she talked about her own life. A habit she suspected Soo-ah had once complained he'd stopped extending toward her. The fact that she'd started looking forward to the visits themselves, and not just their purpose. The unfamiliar comfort of a Tuesday evening spent quietly assembling a crib mobile together in a silence that had somehow stopped being awkward months ago. I need to say something, and I need you to know I've fought against saying it for at least 2 months, Tae-young told her one night, after Hana had finally settled into sleep, both of them sitting in the same nursery where Soo-ah had died. I think I'm supposed to feel guilty about this. I think a version of me from a year ago would find this unforgivable. Say it anyway, Efua said quietly, already suspecting exactly what it was. I don't think you're just keeping a promise to my wife anymore. I don't think I'm just grateful to you as my daughter's other parent anymore either. I think somewhere in the last 5 months, this became something neither of us actually planned, and I don't know what to do with that, because it feels like a betrayal of her memory, and also like the only honest thing I've felt since she died. This is the part every version of this story usually rushes past. The guilt, the confusion, the fear of loving someone in a grief you haven't finished. Stay with me, because what happens next isn't the easy answer you're expecting. Efua didn't answer immediately, giving the question the same weight she'd given every decision that had mattered since the delivery room. I read her letter again last week, she said finally. She asked me to stay long enough that Hana grows up knowing what it looks like when someone shows up without being asked twice. I don't think she was only talking about Hana when she wrote that. I think some part of her already suspected this might happen. And instead of being threatened by it, she made room for it in the last honest thing she ever wrote to anyone. Efua looked at him directly. I don't think loving you is a betrayal of her memory. I think it might be the exact thing she was quietly hopping for, without ever being able to say it outright, because some kinds of love are only possible to admit once you're no longer here to be hurt by them. That feels like something I want to be true, Tae-young said, more than something I'm sure of yet. Then we don't have to be sure yet, Efua said. We have a daughter who needs both of us to be patient with this, exactly the way her mother asked me to be patient with you. That's enough for now. No dramatic declaration. No swelling music demanding you feel a certain way about this. Just two grieving people, choosing something slow and uncertain and real, instead of forcing an answer neither of them has earned yet. It took another 8 months, through Hana's first steps, through a difficult anniversary of Soo-ah's death that neither of them pretended wasn't difficult, through the slow, ordinary accumulation of a life built one honest Tuesday at a time, before either of them said the word love out loud. It happened, fittingly, in the nursery again, Hana asleep between them on the floor after a long evening of teaching her to stack blocks. She mostly just knocked over instead. "I love you," Tae-young said, quietly enough that it took Efua a moment to register. He'd actually said it, and not simply thought it loudly enough to imagine. "I've been sitting on that sentence for 3 weeks trying to figure out if it was allowed." "It's allowed," Efua said. "I love you too. I have for longer than I let myself admit, because I kept telling myself I was only staying for a promise, and it took me embarrassingly long to notice the promise had turned into something I wasn't keeping out of obligation anymore." Neither of them reached for the other immediately. The moment held instead in the quiet, unhurried space of two people who had learned, over the last year, that the important things didn't need to be rushed to be real. "She'd tease us mercilessly for how long this took," Tae-young said finally, a real, unguarded laugh breaking through for the first time in longer than Efua had known him. "She'd tease us," Efua agreed, "and then she'd say she told us so, months before either of us admitted it to ourselves. A promise made by a dying woman, kept, honored, and somehow, against every reasonable expectation, transformed into an entirely unplanned love neither of them saw coming, and neither, it turns out, did she fail to see it coming at all. They married quietly 18 months after Hana was born, in a small ceremony that included, deliberately and without either of them needing to discuss it, a framed photo of Soo-ah on the table nearest the altar, not as a shadow over the day, but as the reason, in the most literal sense, that any of it had become possible at all. Hana, 2 years old by then, spent most of the ceremony trying to eat the flowers from her small basket, entirely unaware that she was the center of a promise that had somehow become a family. No neat lesson, no easy moral, just a woman who kept a promise longer than she had to, and found something she never contracted for waiting on the other side of it. If this story surprised you, that was the point. Let me know in the comments what you thought Efua would choose in that delivery room before you knew how it ended, and subscribe, because the next story goes somewhere just as unexpected. See you in the next one.